And thank you to all of the veterans for what you have done and what you continue to do for our country. Thank you so much. It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our guest speaker today. And when Mr. Chernisky asked me to introduce Mr. Briggs, I was concerned at first because I wasn't sure what I should say or how I should introduce him. But I came back to what I often ask my students to do, is give a one-word summary. If I could give a one-word summary of Mr. Briggs, I would use the word dedication for several reasons. Obviously, his service to the country, and all of you know that, what he did, and that's why he's speaking today. But I wanted to tell you some things about Mr. Briggs that some of you may not know. Mr. Briggs is an extremely talented musician. He is a sportsman, competition shooter. He has a very productive garden. He knows virtually everything about every sport. He did some boxing a few years ago. He also is an extremely talented carpenter. And every morning, he prints off a Sudoku puzzle that I believe is labeled like Super Evil Genius or something in the skill level. And he has it done by 8 o'clock every single morning. Mr. Briggs is always the most interesting and smartest person in every room that he is in, all the time. And it is an honor and a privilege to introduce my colleague, Mr. Jeff Briggs.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder, for those kind words. Earlier this year, I read an article about a wealthy landowner down in the South. He had a feral pig problem. Even though he had the means to take care of his situation quickly by hiring hunters, I was interested to find out that his method involved patience and lots of corn. His idea was to bait the pigs into a restricted area using the corn and then build a fence around them. He built a first wall, and the pigs ignored it because of the free corn. They didn't have to root around in the woods to find the food. It was presented to them and was easily accessible. Later, he built a second wall, then a third, and then finally a fourth wall with a gate. When the fence was complete, he fed them a last time and shut the gate. While the process took a long time, it was more successful than the other methods, according to the landowner. He wasn't looking for the fastest solution, just the one that best met his needs. Keep that story in mind. We'll come back to it a little bit later in our talk. Now I'd like to take a moment and then welcome everyone again, particularly the honored veterans, my compatriots in the front. Thank you for your service. I'd also like to welcome the administrators, the staff of Commodore Perry, and most importantly, the students of our school to this Veterans Day Assembly. While I will speak to everyone in the audience, my particular concern today will be to address you young Americans in a way that I can't in physics class. The bottom line of my short talk is that freedom isn't free. It is our birthright as Americans, but every generation has had to defend that legacy. and your generation is on deck. As President Reagan observed, freedom is only one generation from extinction. You will be tested, but I have every confidence that you will meet the challenge. I caution you, however, that not every threat that we will face will come from overseas. Some of our most serious challenges are homegrown. The veterans we honor today were ordinary men and women, compelled by a love of liberty to serve. Men and women, like the veterans in attendance today. They were ordinary Americans that performed extraordinary acts of courage in liberating Europe and Asia from tyrants, in freeing 50 million people in Iraq and Afghanistan, and currently in helping to end the long civil war in Syria. What were these veterans fighting against? They fought against totalitarian regimes, led by tyrants who held their population in shackles. They denied them liberty, persecuted large swaths of their population, and killed their countrymen in genocidal cleansing. Over 100 million people have died in the last 100 years from such despots. America has been traditionally generous with our treasure and soldiers in order to free oppressed people. Some have characterized operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria as a war on terrorism. But I think that's a mistake. It's a war against tyranny, this time garbed in fundamental religious clothing, but it remains at its heart a war for freedom. Many wise voices tell us that we are not the world's policemen. I agree with this sentiment because our job is not to maintain the peace. I see our role rather as a guarantor of freedom. In this view, I am not alone. 57 years ago, at his inauguration, President Kennedy said, "Let every nation know, whether they wish us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, in order to assure the survival and success of liberty." There's a plaque commemorating that quote between Soldiers Field and Field Museum in Chicago. I have visited that plaque many times while chaperoning senior trips to that city, and that quote is one of my favorites. President Kennedy's party has changed since 1961, and I have listened in vain for someone in his party to espouse a similar policy in the last 25 years. When you are young, it is hard to realize and appreciate what you have. It is hard to understand how blessed you are to wake up every day in the prosperity we have here in America. As you age, however, you begin to understand that the good things in life are not accidents. In fact, the good things we often take for granted are the exceptions to the rule. The truly great things in life don't just happen. They require great sacrifice. I believe that everyone in every nation yearns to be free, but freedom does not spontaneously sprout. In fact, it seems to me that the opposite is true. Without men and women who will make great sacrifices for freedom, to leave home, to fight, to perhaps die, one might eventually be able to live in peace. But peace is not freedom. Peace is merely the absence of conflict. There are many today that confuse the two conditions and would give up some of their freedom in order to have peace. Ben Franklin said that those that would give up essential freedoms for temporary security deserve neither, and I agree. Patrick Henry summed it up well in the debates that led to our Declaration of Independence when he said, "Give me liberty or give me death." I'm sure you've discussed this quotation in civics class, but you may not have studied the preceding line of his speech. I believe it to be revealing. He said, "Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery?" Patrick Henry didn't think so, and neither do I. In my opinion, it is better to live as a free people and accept occasional conflict than to live in perpetual peace under tyranny. Those of you who have heard me speak on the subject know that one of my pet peeves is hearing that we live in a democracy. We certainly do not. As our friend Ben Franklin said, a democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding on what's for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. Our service personnel are on watch 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, to ensure that our Constitution provides protection to the rights of the land. Men and women are on duty protecting the rights of all Americans, even those of the protester and the flag bearer. We live in a constitutional republic whose freedoms are guaranteed by a document that has remained in force since May of 1787. A document that can be changed only by a rigorous process of amendment. There are some that would bypass this amendment process and allow judicial activism to erode our freedoms. I challenge each of you to ensure that this does not happen. On the domestic front, President Kennedy's party is drifting further towards socialism each election cycle. And some of the candidates in the election this week were avowed socialists. I know many college students are enamored with socialism. Che Guevara t-shirts are common in the college applause. Some of you here might wonder what I am so concerned about. Well, I'll tell you. President Lincoln long ago predicted that America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we have destroyed ourselves. Every year we lose essential liberty as our country slides towards socialism. Socialism is particularly dangerous because it is well suited to today's political climate. Its proponents say that it is fair. It will help people who deserve it. And the people who pay for it have so much that they will barely listen. The problem is that slowly but surely it will eat at the core of our society. Firstly, it kills economic growth. When you take from the wealthy people in society and give it to the less successful, you reduce the numbers of wealthy people and encourage more people to fail. Penalizing success and rewarding failure is not a good strategy for a society's economy. As we rapidly approach Thanksgiving, it is appropriate to note that the first Thanksgiving was a celebration of abundance, after an initial experiment with socialism killed half the colonists due to starvation. To his credit, Governor Bradford assigned a tract of land to each family the following year, and the resulting harvest was bountiful. Bradford noted in his memoirs that it made all hands more industrious. Pastor Adrian Rogers said that the government cannot give to anybody anything that the government does not first take from somebody else. And half the people get the idea that they do not have to work because the other half is going to take care of them. That, my friend, is about the end of any nation. You cannot multiply wealth by dividing. Secondly, it leads to ever larger governance. Socialism requires massive bureaucracy that inevitably grows to regulate the people and economy. Thomas Jefferson said that a government big enough to give us everything we want is a government powerful enough to take everything that we have. Lastly, socialists believe that the ends justify the means. In the effort to further socialism, it is acceptable that rules and regulations mean different things for different people. If you watched the Justice Kavanaugh confirmation a few weeks ago, you saw this in action. In order to derail his confirmation, he was accused with unsubstantiated allegations, and the accusers demanded that the allegations be accepted. Where was due process and basic considerations of fairness? Yet, a high official in the accuser's party was credibly accused of sexual battery, and this accusation was ignored. This is not the America that I know. As Winston Churchill noted, socialism is a philosophy of failure, a creed of ignorance, the gospel of envy. Its inherent value is the equal sharing of misery. We now return to the pig story. In thinking about this story, it dawned on me that it's a good metaphor for the current conditions in our country, except that we, the people, are the pigs, and the government is the rancher. The government keeps spreading free corn, such as supplemental income, tax exemptions, agriculture subsidies, payments made to not plant crops, welfare, and medicine, while we continue to lose our freedom. The whole time that we are munching on the corn, the government is building a fence. They can be patient. In the end, the government will force us to participate, whether or not we want to take part. Moreover, the government expands to control each new program, and the new office will never disappear. As President Reagan said, a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life that we'll ever see on earth. The cost of freedom remains high, but we the American people, and we the American soldier, must be willing to pay the price. Today, the threat to our values and liberty comes from militant Islam and creeping socialism. Tomorrow, a foreign threat may come from communist China. They are already rattling their sabers. As we have done throughout our history, we must face and defeat these challenges. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines are ready to meet these threats if those of us in the rear echelon have the will to see this through. I hope we love freedom more than we hate war. Or conversely, I trust that we hate tyranny more than we love peace. In all too short a time, I and my veteran compatriots will hand off our responsibilities to our sons and daughters. A new generation, you, young Americans, will rise up and take charge of leading and protecting this nation. All members of society will have a part to play in preserving our liberties. For those in the service, your job will be to follow the lawful orders of your superiors. For those in support of the troops, ensure that the soldiers are well provisioned and that the soldiers know that their service is appreciated. For both groups, ensure that judicial activism doesn't make de facto changes to our Constitution, and protect your freedoms by voting for candidates that support the Constitution and the individual liberties that it contains. America is a wonderful country, and this corner of Pennsylvania is the most special of all the places I have visited in my many deployments all over the world. God has truly blessed the United States. On this Veterans Day, be thankful for the sacrifice of earlier generations of patriots that have preserved and protected the Republic in the past, and resolve to be ready when called upon to do your part in the future. May God bless America. Thank you.